with me. So thank you all for coming. We like to start on time. This is an educational webinar on how to decide time to move to the cloud. It's not product specific. I'm not really hawking a particular product, but my experience is around Dynamics SL, and which is an on-premise package, and Acumatica, which is a cloud, new technology cloud type of accounting system. So my name is Mike Milligan. I'm your host here at AccuNet. I'm always available for questions if anybody wants to call me later. If they'd like to come out of the site and talk about your systems and the strategy and processes you guys are working through, I'd love to do that. This presentation is based on working with hundreds of businesses as they decide to take their ERP systems enterprise-wide to remote locations, worldwide, and now the option of to the cloud. So what we like to do is help businesses as they're trying to decide on their business's ERP strategy. And the seminar title is How to Decide When to Move Your Financial ERP System to the Cloud. Wait for my screen to change here. So next up is the agenda. And, I'll be talking just briefly. I've really already done the intro. Want to promote our next webinar next month, which is on June 18th, 2 p.m. Eastern is the magic hour for webinars. Lets people from the East Coast get in without getting up too early and not too late for those even around the world. So it's on nonprofit accounting in the cloud. We've got a few nonprofits that are signed up. So we'll be talking about things like restricted funds, grant management, again, using Acumatica as our cloud ERP solution. But today we're going to talk about how to decide when to move to the cloud. So I'm a big definitions guy. You might have heard people say, is your software SaaS, S-A-A-S, with capital S's? And that's just short for software as a service. And another term in there is publisher. Publisher is somebody like Microsoft, Acumatica, NetSuite, or even QuickBooks has a cloud ERP solution. So the publisher keeps the software updated. They also handle upgrades. They provide the servers and the hardware for you to support that system. They back it up. They secure it from viruses and hacks. They performance tune it. They do disaster recovery, licensing. They take care of the application. They'll even in a global environment, they'll handle multi-language solutions and special compliance per country. We'll talk a little bit about that. Companies like Germany and Canada just enacted a new law that affects the way a cloud system is hosted. So even though it's in the cloud, you need somebody big enough that can sometimes have a local server right there in that country to help comply with that country's data protection laws, which are bigger in Europe than they are in the US, but they're coming this way. We'll see that in the US eventually. Something else that a cloud provider provides is a service level agreement. Those are typically called SLAs. Somebody like Acumatica is in the 99.9% range and up. What I see with Acumatica, I get a little notice when they're going to do an update on the system, and it'll be something like, hey, next week at 2 a.m. in the morning, we're going to do a security update, and it's going to take about 15 minutes. And so the system's down between 2 a.m. and 2:15. And that gives me and the customer a chance to talk just in case they're doing something at 2 a.m. in the morning that day and they want to change it to a different day. We can work that out. But what the SLA does is they agree, they promise, we're going to have an uptime of whatever it is, greater than 99.9% uptime. And if we fail in that, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you, 20% of your monthly subscription fee back if you're down for more than 30 minutes. If you're down for more than 4 hours, we're going to give you half of your monthly fee back. And if you're down longer than that, which I've never seen happen with somebody like AccuNet, we're going to give you more back. So they predefine the rules and tell you exactly what will happen if they don't keep up their promise. So that's what an SLA is. So that's where software as a service, the term comes from. It's a bundle of software, hardware, and the services, like the disaster recovery. They'll do the upgrades for you in many cases. They do regular updates. So they bundle all that together, and that's what you get with that software as a service. And you typically pay for that on a monthly fee or an annual fee. And so that's you're renting that software. So that's a true cloud type of definition. Let's see if there's anything else on this screen. So some broad reasons for the script for the cloud. Some of it's generational. The millennials coming up expect to be able to work remotely, work from their cell phone, and that comes with the new modern cloud software. But basically what you're talking about is remote access anytime, anywhere. We are increasingly in this 24-hour work cycle where you might need to be working with folks in Australia, and that means working in the middle of the night for a couple hours. When you have a cloud-based system, it facilitates that. A lot of the millennials like to be able to work from home. I like to be able to work from home. I try and work from home on Fridays. And with a cloud system, that helps empower me to do that. But you also have things like maternity leave. Somebody gets disabled with a back problem. They can't come to the office, but they can still work some from home. Excuse me. Traveling workers. Increasingly you've got field service, salespeople, customer service people, technicians that are traveling. And if they can put in their time, expenses, get the customer to approve a bill, they can do a quote on site. These all are empowering things that if you can do that work from a mobile phone or a tablet, which cloud allows you to do, it gives you a lot of flexibility. I like to take vacations, but frankly, as a business owner, it's hard for me to do. But with cloud software, I can log into the system for a couple hours in the morning, get most of the critical stuff done, check in later at night, keep things running, and I can still take my vacations. And your employees want to be able to do this too. But even within the your facility, running cable out to a warehouse or a large building is tough to do with the cloud. But with Wi-Fi and the cloud, that allows you to do that. And you don't have to drag a big PC around on a cart, which I've done for businesses in the past. You can do it with a small tablet, or again with that smartphone. Might be enough to allow that person to approve a work order, to receive some inventory or move some inventory from one location to the next, or to put it onto a project or a work order. And you can work from your car, so these type of things all help. Increasingly what you're wanting to do when you're working with a customer is get them to sign, on the tablet, just like we all do now with our credit cards. You can do that on a tablet in the field. And there's also a GPS location. In some cases it's nice to be able to track your truck and know that your service vehicle, is at the customer site or where it's at, and be able to track its location. Because you might want to say, hey, when you finish this project, you're only 10 minutes away from another job. I'm going to redirect you and want you to go over there. So this new cloud technology really empowers that type of thing over the internet with very low bandwidth. Right. Next slide. Probably the number one reason I hear from businesses telling me why they do not want to go to the cloud is because of security. And we've all heard stories of, my goodness, the federal government getting hacked. Target was a big one that was hacked. But these systems are really not cloud systems. These are just big on-premise systems. They're big, Target has a big mainframe, and that's where their data is hosted, and people are getting to the application just like we traditionally would with something like Dynamics SL. They're using a terminal server type connection. And that's in fact what happened with Target. They had one of their vendors wanted them to be able to enter when they were shipping new inventory to their warehouse location. And it was the vendor that got hacked because they had a crappy firewall. They got hacked, and that allowed the hacker to get into uncover their vendor ID, and using that vendor ID and login, they got into the bigger Target system and then got a bunch of credit cards. So that's the way a lot of these hackings are coming about. But I can say unequivocally that your software is more safe in the cloud than it is on-premise. And the only way you can lock down an on-premise system is to cut all the internet connections to the building, the phone connections, and not let anybody talk to the people using the computer or getting onto the server, which makes the system worthless. If you want to distribute data and ideally, fulfill the dream of enterprise. Enterprise means everybody on the system. Classically, we just had the accounting folks in the computer, in the accounting system. But there's a lot of data and value in that accounting system that if you can push it out to the rest of the employees, to theoretically all employees, or at least all employees that need some value or some input to the system, so that they can enter that inventory receipt. They can update that new contact information in your CRM system, update a phone number. A board member can review financial reports without getting an email, which is not that secure either, or calling in and bugging the accounting department to get that. The ideal enterprise system is available to potentially everybody in the business. That's what makes ERP an enterprise system. If it's not an enterprise system, it's just an accounting system. And there's a lot more value in making your accounting system into an enterprise system. So when you think about somebody like, the two big dogs in this race for cloud hosting or cloud providers are Microsoft with their Azure system and Amazon with their cloud system. Those are the two big dogs. Acumatica right now is on Amazon, but in the past, Acumatica had their system on Microsoft. But it turned out that Amazon was offering more services, more countries, probably a better price, and so they moved all their systems from Microsoft over to Amazon 3 or 4 years ago. That's how portable, that kind of demonstrates how portable the cloud is. If one provider is not doing well, it's very easy to move that to another cloud provider. Companies like Amazon have literally thousands of people that are testing the network, keeping security updated, investing in the latest security protocols, and they even pay hackers to try and hack their system. So if they do manage to break it, they tell them how they did it, and then they plug that gap. A small business just cannot afford to do that. So that's why I say I guarantee you that the cloud is more secure than your small business or even larger size business. And when you think about it, where are credit card transactions handled today? They're all handled in the cloud. You might process it here, on your, we can do credit card transactions through Solomon or Acumatica, but we use a service that's in the cloud. APS is a popular one, that it goes through their gateway, they process the transaction, they store the credit card number in the cloud. Well, we don't store it locally because it would be a violation of the credit card rules. So none of the customer information is stored locally, so it can't be stolen. It's in the cloud. Most of the payroll services that people use today are in the cloud. And again, there's highly confidential information, and it's all in the cloud. I was working on my Social Security benefits the other day. Where is it at? It's in the cloud. So the really secure stuff is already in the cloud. And small and mid-sized businesses are just, in the last couple of years, saying, yep, we got to move to the cloud. That's the best place to be. One of the, things that even if you have good security, you still have the liability of the people side of it. And some of these scams that hackers are using now, they call them phishing scams, phishing, and you pronounce it phishing scam because that's what they're doing. They're phishing to see if they can get a bite from somebody if they'll give them some information. And they make it very realistic. I mean, they'll do their research. They'll hit your website, they'll look at LinkedIn, they'll use real people's names and real people's emails and addresses. They can get your logo and put it on the email and say, hey, we're updating our passwords. Go to this link and enter your new password. And when you go to that link, that's their link, and they got your password. And then they can use that new password to go into the system and hack and do more damage. They even do, they even call people up and say, hey, we're the IT department. We noticed you had a bug. Could you go to this link and we'll fix it for you? And then when the user goes to that link, they've been hacked. So they put a lot of time into this, and it's not just your computer security and your firewall. It's the people issues too. And by putting that in the cloud, they have the intelligence to know, even when you change that password, that they can prevent a lot of those things from happening. And then on top of that, they've got the backups and the disaster recovery to get us back up if the hacker does manage to do some bad damage. So that's my little knitting story. Typically when you think of hackers and people getting viruses, you think of people doing bad things. I mean, you think of computer programmers going to hacker websites, or you think of unfortunately in this day and age, people going to porn sites. Those are notoriously bad for viruses. That people doing these bad things, going to bad, quote unquote, bad sites, is where they pick up these viruses. But in reality, it's all kinds of sites. About 10 years ago, we had a little old lady working for us doing some bookkeeping and admin type work. And she went to a knitting site to download a pattern so that she could do a new knitting project. And that site had a virus, and it downloaded a virus and hacked her workstation. So it's not just people doing bad things. It's sites that look totally legitimate could have been hacked, and sometimes there are even legitimate sites that have been hacked to spread viruses. So you just can't be too careful. So that's security. Let's go on to multiple locations. Today, AccuNet, it amazes me. I mean, we're working with countries all around the world, with customers, typically US-based customers, but they are global companies. They have multiple offices. So they are in different time zones, varying internet speeds. So I've got a missionary group that's doing work in Africa, and all they can count on is cell phone speeds. So there's no way they can drag that fat SL client through a terminal server over a cell phone signal and have it work reliably. But on a cloud, it's designed to work over a cell phone, and it's fast and responsive, and they can get the work done they need, even in Africa. Virtual offices are a big thing, of course, and those virtual offices might be temporary. The other nice thing about cloud software is that it scales up and scales down. So you might have a project in the EU that's 6 months or a year, and then when you shut that location down, you can reduce the number of transactions or reduce the cost of that monthly bill and scale down without any problem. If you had to buy all that hardware and buy those licensing and those user counts, if you remember with Microsoft, once you buy a user, only thing you can do is forfeit it to give it back and reduce the cost of your maintenance plan. With most of the cloud software, it's transaction based. So you reduce your transactions and you reduce the cost of the monthly license. So when I say IT over WAN, that's your traditional terminal server type client, Citrix server type client, which tries to make a fat client like SL work fast over the internet. That's what those packages do. But my argument is that it's expensive and it's vulnerable. If most people know, with a terminal server type of connection, what you do is open a specific port on your firewall to let that terminal server client get through. Of course, there's other ways to lock it down, but you've basically opened a hole in your firewall to run a terminal server. That is a security risk by itself. With the cloud, you don't have that. Okay, on to the next slide is freedom from hardware. Most of you use a depreciation schedule of 5 years for a new server or workstation. And that's the rule of thumb that we use, that you'll generally have to replace your server hardware. And unfortunately with that, increasingly, like the Microsoft server license, Microsoft SQL license, and Microsoft terminal server licenses, all are generally on a 5-year schedule as well. So you have to replace them or keep them updated, which is very, very expensive. And so every 5 years, you're having a big capital infusion where you're spending $20,000, $25,000, $35,000. Some of the server projects we do are $50,000 just on the server license, SQL license, server and terminal server. So you're spending a big chunk of cash up front to run your on-premise software. With the cloud, you don't have to have that software or those licenses to run the cloud software. That's all part of that bundled SaaS software. Along with that is power consumption and noise. Some of these servers, they sound like a small jet engine taking off. And if you have a small office and it has to be out in an open area, it can be pretty noisy. So having that server, at an Amazon hosting center where you don't have to hear it, definitely quiets down the office. You don't have the cooling and heat issues, and you're more green. It is more economical for Amazon to run all their virtual servers with their power systems. They can run more efficiently on the power per CPU delivered than we can by having a server setting in our room or our office that's only used for 12 hours a day, and the other 12 hours a day it's sitting there just spinning and not being used, but it's still consuming power. They get better utilization of their servers in a data center than we can. So you never have to do a server upgrade, never have to do a server purchase. I can't tell you how many weekends over the last 30 years I've had to come into the office over the weekend while we did a server replacement. So all that aggravation goes away. So no long nights or weekends with that. Nothing against IT people, and we have IT people, on this webinar, but it is a significant cost. If you outsource the IT cost, we use as a rough rule of thumb $500 per server per month. If you have a hardware person on staff, most of those IT people are running $60K, in some cases well into the several $100,000, and they're worth it. They're very valuable. We have a lot of strong IT people here at AccuNet. But if you outsource that server, you outsource that cost. And not that I say you're going to, reduce your FTE count. I've never seen an IT guy that wasn't swamped and behind on projects, valuable projects that they'd like to do for the company that are strategic, that will actually increase sales or improve customer service or improve their security. But they can't get to it because they're swapping out ink cartridges on somebody's local printer. That is a poor use of resources. So if you can outsource this server and make it part of that monthly SaaS cost, you then free up your IT guy to work on mission critical strategic type events and get a lot more bang for your buck out of those IT resources. Okay. Yeah, so we talked about this. Yeah, and yet that part of that last line is avoid growing your internal IT. So like I say, they're always busy. If you have to add that next person, that's another $60,000 of FTE costs. Not that they wouldn't be busy, but wouldn't it be better just to say, this next server to run my new ERP system will break the back of my IT people, so I'm going to outsource it as part of the cloud. So that's the strategy there, to avoid growing your IT staff. A big thing that every small business, I preach this all the time, is disaster recovery processes. And with the weather we've been having recently, you can see it. I mean, flood damage is a big problem. Rain damage is a big problem. About 20 years ago, we had a location that had an old sprinkler system in it, and the sprinkler system failed, and it was right over top of one of our servers. So the sprinkler actually broke and shorted out the server. So that type of damage can happen. A backhoe can cut your fiber cable or cut your power cable outside your building, and they weren't even working on your office. They were working on the guy next door's office. So things happen, and that downtime costs money. And it also costs money to have good disaster recovery. And the thing is, with disaster recovery, you hope to never use it. But to reliably ensure it'll be there when you need it, you have to spend a lot of money on it, and you have to test it. So every 3 months or 6 months, you got to do a switch over to what happens if my power fails. Have I actually restored my backup from tape or from an attached storage or from the cloud? Again, a lot of people are doing backup to the cloud now. So there's another use of high security information on the cloud. So, one of the things that just recently happened with one of our customers that was using Dynamics SL but was not using our IT services, they got ransomware. And what was wild about this case, they were actually hosting their servers in a data center. It was a small regional data center, but it was a data center. But they still had a physical server there, and they got it was a data center that got ransomware. It wasn't the customer, and it brought their SL system down. And if you know what ransomware does, it encrypts all the program files, report files. So FRX, crystal reports, any customization, those are all encrypted. And then they send a link to you and say, send us, based on the size of your business, they kind of make a guess and they say, send us $5,000 and we'll send you the password that'll encrypt your data. But the trouble is, if you do that, then you're just setting yourself up for the next virus. And in many cases, the FBI is shutting down those ransomware sites as fast as they come up. So sometimes you can't even pay the guy if you wanted to. And unfortunately, most of these hackers are out of North Korea, Iran, some of the lawless states, Syria, Iraq. That's where some of this stuff's coming from, and you definitely don't want to send those people money. It's paying to literally have your head cut off in the future is what you're doing. So they didn't pay the ransom, and it took 10 days for the data center to get back up because it literally affected hundreds of servers. So it's still happening. It's still frequent out there. But those type of things just don't happen on an Amazon or Microsoft cloud system. Another thing to consider with a cloud is cash flow. We just talked about buying new servers that are $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. All that money you spend up front, and you spend it up front before it's even installed in most cases. So that cash has already been burned up, and you aren't even getting the benefit out of it. With a cloud system, you pay for 1 month up front, and the software is there. Here's the server, here's the software, and here's your login. Start using it, start implementing. So the ROI is faster, and you have less cash up front. Beside the server cost, if you look at even the typical SL implementation, or for software was $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of software up front, well before it was implemented. And then you paid AccuNet to implement the system, so that was another $40,000, $60,000 to implement it. And it probably didn't get implemented for 3 months to 6 months. With a cloud system, all that software setup is done in advance, and you can start with just 1 month's bill. So besides having lower cash up front, you also have a lower risk. Because guess what? If 3, 4, 6 months down the road, the system isn't doing what it should be doing for you, you can just cancel that subscription. So it lowers your risk on implementing these systems as well. All right, on to upgrade costs. I mean, just to compare kind of on-premise to the cloud, on-premise is your traditional SL type system. One of the things we've seen with SL upgrade costs, when you look back, just 10 years ago, a typical SL upgrade for us would be $35,000 to maybe $5,000. And that would be an SL upgrade to take you from version 5 to version 6, or version 6 to version 7. But recently, it's got more complex. The financial report writers have got more complex. SQL has got more complex, and the upgrade itself has got more complex. So you have to do a pilot and test it out, and then do a final upgrade. A lot of times there's integrations and customizations that have happened over the years. So it's very typical for us now to be in the $15,000, $20,000 range on an upgrade with an on-premise system. So one of the things I hear from people is, hey, well, I've already bought SL, I own it, so there's no cost to it. Well, actually, there is a cost. Besides that annual maintenance fee you're spending, which is $3,000, $4,000 at least by itself, you've got the upgrade cost that you have to do every 3 years or so. Is usually you start to get old and then find out that SL is not working with a newer workstation or with Office or something like that, and you're forced to upgrade. So you're buying that hardware and you're paying for that upgrade, and those are serious costs. In the cloud, the upgrades are minor events. Acumatica actually does the upgrade for us. All we have to test are customizations, integrations, special reports. So they actually provide a sandbox, which is a duplicate copy of your system upgraded. So you're still using the current one, and you have the practice one that you can test in and compare. So you got 2 systems up simultaneously that come with the subscription. And once it's tested out, they do a data refresh on it, and you go live on the test system. Now becomes production. So that cost is greatly reduced with cloud software. So that's a difference there. We are in a global world now. Probably 65% of my customers have offices outside of the United States. And it might just be Canada or Mexico. A lot of them are North America, but that still has a global effect. And increasingly, we're doing business in China. The EU is very, very common anymore. And when you look at countries like Germany, for example, they have something called the German Federal Data Protection Act. And there's also the EU Consumer Protection Act. And it's kind of like when you sign up for a newsletter and agree to send email, that you agree to accept email. That's the way they treat your ERP system. If you have a customer's data, which is their name, address, phone number, maybe their email, on your system, you have to comply with the EU consumer protection laws. And that's an added layer of compliance that systems like Acumatica in the cloud do for you, and you don't have to worry about it. Where if it's on premise, all that responsibility falls on you if you're trying to do business in Germany. Another thing that's great is language and performance. If you've ever tried to do users in China, you have special performance issues. And a lot of those performance issues go away if you have a local server in China. So that is what somebody like Amazon can do. They have the horsepower to say, you've got users in China, we're going to put one of the servers on this network of servers that looks like one to you, but it's really a network of servers. And they put one of those in China so that those users get faster response. And it also, by having it in China, it complies with a lot of their rules so that you don't have any contingency rules or problems with China. Something that we recently found out that I thought was outstanding was Canada just enacted some new compliance laws. And if the server is located in China or in Canada, you don't have the tough compliance rules that you do if the server is located in the US or elsewhere. So what was really neat, this was an Acumatica customer that was out of Canada. Acumatica sent us a notice and said, hey, Canada's enacted some new laws. What we're going to do is move their server from its US location to Toronto so that complies better with Canadian compliance laws. So I was able to call the customer up. I told them about the new law, which they already knew about, but I looked better because I was able to share that with them before they called me and asked me about it, and say, hey, we're going to move, Acumatica would like to move your server on this weekend or this Friday. Gave them 6 or 8 dates that they could move it on. They got to pick the date, and then they transferred it overnight. It took about an hour and a half. They moved it in the middle of the night again from the US location to Toronto and improved that customer's performance and compliance out of Canada. So that flexibility is hard to beat, and to do that in-house is a big job. Let's talk about some of the typical triggers I see for people moving to the cloud, and we've mentioned some of them already. If you're going to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on server replacement and new SQL software licenses and server licenses, it's a time to think about it. Should I spend that money on-premise, or should I fractionalize that cost and make it a monthly cost and do it in the cloud? So that's a big one that people always need to think about. If I'm doing a major workstation upgrade, so if I'm going out and replacing 10, 20, 30, 100 workstations and putting Windows 10 on them, which is a lot of work for the IT department, would I be better off just going with small tablets? I'm using a notebook now from my workstation, where I used to have a very powerful desktop workstation, but I don't need it now that I have all the software in the cloud. And so that makes it easier on the workstation side, lower cost, easier to support, and less capital up front. If you're moving from if you're doing an on-premise upgrade or a replacement, so if I'm upgrading SL, or any on-premise software. If you're upgrading it, would you be better off spending that money moving to the cloud and getting into modern technology and all the benefits that come with the cloud? Or are you just going to dog paddle and stay with your on-premise software and get current enough that it runs for another 3 years? A lot of people are moving to Office 365, which again is moving your email to the cloud. So if you're moving to Office 365, you're already making a big cloud investment. So if you're moving Office and Exchange to the cloud, that might be a time to say, maybe it's time to move my ERP system to the cloud as well. A lot of folks are outsourcing IT, and they're going with monthly service plans with their IT providers. If you're doing that, you're not going to have a person right there on site. They're going to come in, when you need help, or they'll be there 1 day a week or 2 days a week. You make the support of that server software easier for them and easier for you if you move it to the cloud. So if you're outsourcing your IT, maybe that's a time to consider moving your servers to the cloud. And this one, unfortunately, happens a lot. Once a customer gets a virus, they get ransomware, they get hacked. Something fluky happens. The server burns up, something shorts out, and they're down for a couple of days until that new server is in. That's when they say, aha, now I understand the benefit of the cloud. So think about that before that disaster happens. And then we also mentioned going global. If your business is starting to reach out and do business globally, you'll be more flexible and easier to support that global business from the cloud than you will with on-premise. So the last reason, there are reasons to stay on-premise. And if you look at a firm like AccuNet, we pay Microsoft a big fee every year to be a partner. And as part of that fee, we get a big chunk of software. So I get a big library, full of more Microsoft software than I can ever want to use. But I do get some of that licensing, like Office and SQL and a couple server licenses. So it's already a cost of doing business for me. I get those licenses as part of that fee. So if you're a partner like me, if you're working with Microsoft as a developer or a reseller, or for some other reason you own that software, then you're not spending as much money up front. So maybe that's a reason to stay on premise. You don't feel as much pressure as your typical business would that has to buy all that software. If you're a development firm, similar. I mean, there's a lot of people that are Microsoft developers, and they do a similar type of thing where they license the software as part of their fee, and they get some software free. But also a development firm tends to want to do stuff made in-house. I mean, they write their own code. They like to have it local. So that might be a reason to have it in-house. And then finally, one of the things I see is that, over the years, a company has developed some special in-house system. Either it runs, their warehouse, or it runs their manufacturing plant. It is just something they developed over the years. It's in-house. It's usually older technology, and it's on-premise. And it doesn't talk to the newer cloud software. So they're forced to stay on-premise because their old software is anchoring them to on-premise. And that's just a cost decision, that a business owner has to make. Am I going to let this old technology, this old software package we've been using for decades, is it so valuable that I won't move to the cloud and get those benefits? Or am I going to make the investment and re-engineer that package to work in the cloud? But I tell you something, even though AccuNet gets most of the Microsoft software for free, we still have most of our systems in the cloud. It was still beneficial for us to move to the cloud. And I've got IT people on staff, but I would rather have those IT people out working on customer projects and creating revenue and adding value than I would have them working on internal projects. So my IT guys are busy just like your IT guys probably are. And for those same reasons, we decided to move and are moving more and more of our systems all the time to the cloud. This is something that some of the people on this call have seen this spreadsheet. This is a real life example that I have made generic, just a sample company, but these are real costs for this business. And these first columns are all the costs that I could think of for a cloud implementation. So their software was $18,000 a year, $1,250 a month or something like that. There's tax on it. The deployment cost for that company was $41,000. Okay, so this spreadsheet has all the IT costs, and I've done that for 5 years, because one of the things that I hear people say is, well, cloud might be more cost effective the first year, but over the long term, over 5 years, on-premise is going to catch up with it. But the reality is that those lines never cross. The fixed cost is always higher than the on-premise cost, or the cloud is always cheaper. So these are the costs to manage that system. And then if you flip over to the on-premise side, here's the cost of that same software if you bought it on-premise, 42 versus 18. But then you have an annual maintenance plan. That's another thing with cloud software. The annual maintenance plan comes with the service. So there's no cost on the cloud side, but there's an 18% charge per year on the on-premise side. So that cost runs out for 5 years. You got the tax, which is real high the first year, but you got a tax for year 2, year 3. And then you got the implementation cost for year 1, where you do most of that cost. And then I had to do a little bit of forecasting here and modeling. What I did, and I did this about 8 years ago, I went back and looked at all our SL implementations. And what I found is that if you spend $52,000 with me in year 1, you'll typically spend a third of that again with me in year 2. And then you look at year 3, it's usually about 10, I don't know what that is, 20%. And then usually by year 4, the customer is totally burned out and they're like, I don't want to do anything else. Let's just use the system as it is. And they don't spend any money in year 4. But then by year 5, typically they need to do an upgrade or they need to do a new project and they start spending money again. So that's where those costs came from. And if you look at this cost, you can see up in the formula box here that I've taken that same implementation number and I've put 40% of it up front. So 40% of it hits in the first month. But then I divided the other 60% over the next 18 months. So what we do with cloud implementations is take that big nut implementation fee and we spread it over the first 18 months of the implementation so that helps the cash flow. And then some of these other numbers that you have on on-premise is it's just 2 hours per month of help desk support is $4,200 a year. So it adds up. And I think that's a low number. A lot of people will spend more than 2 hours a month of help desk on their ERP system. I put in new server implementation costs, and then the $500 a month, or I think I used $250 here. Yeah, I used $250 a month to maintain that server, just as a cost to keeping it updated and maintained. Then I've got some new server costs, SQL costs, and these are very close to real numbers. And then disaster recovery costs. So if you use something like the Datto, which is an attached storage that also backs up to the cloud, it costs about $700 a month for that utility to give you disaster recovery that's not as good as Amazon, but close. So I put that cost in there. And then, that's the $7,200 is actually the cost of the Datto. And then I put in some new employee training costs, which are part of our SaaS plan. So we do that as part of the plan that comes with it. So there's zero cost over here. And then additionally, since the upgrades are primarily done by Acumatica, we just have to do testing and training and test the integrations and stuff. We throw the upgrades into the SaaS plan. So there's no cost for the upgrade. But if you had an upgrade on premise with Acumatica, it would cost about 40 hours of work, and that's where I came up with that $4,400. And with cloud software, they want to keep you current. So you have to stay about 18 months to 24 months current. So every 2 years, you have to upgrade cloud software. Again, if you've got it in the cloud, it just pretty much happens. If you had it on premise, you'd have to pay for that upgrade. So if you look at these bottom line numbers on total cash outlay, you can see that in 5 years, you'd spend $204,000, roughly $205,000 for a cloud implementation, but you'd spend $314,000 for on-premise. So the total number over 5 years is clearly a better deal in the cloud. And then finally, if you look down here, is the cash flow outflow, the cash flow model. Because you're saving some money on not buying equipment, you're not paying for your old SL maintenance plan, you actually have some cost savings moving to the cloud. So your cash outlay the first year is only $55,000 for the cloud, compared to on-premise is $141,000. So all that drives the ROI and makes the cloud solution a better deal as far as return on investment, lower risk, and just frankly, less money. So it hits on all those points. So I'm going to go ahead and encourage anybody to ask any questions. If anybody wants to ask those, I'm happy to field those questions. If not, we'll start ramping things down. I appreciate you guys taking this time. So we did run just about an hour. And this recording will be up on our website. I'll send everybody a link with an invite to it. I encourage you to share it with other people. And if you want to talk specifically about your situation, if you don't believe me that the cloud will be less, let's take a look at your specific situation and we'll run the numbers. We'll run it through the same spreadsheet. You can tell me what the numbers will be, and then we'll see how the total works out. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming. Again, any last chance for questions? Okay, folks, I appreciate it so much. I'm going to let you all go. Thank you.